Hello and welcome to episode 141 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans occasionally on topic podcast. I'm your host for today, Peter Triezenberg. I have Fury on the boards that we don't use very often anymore. Joining me today, we have the illustrious crew, including podcast newcomer Gino DiGioia.
What's up?
Dom Kim.
Hello, hello.
And Mike Sollosi, fresh off the E3 ship.
Yeah, I'm still kind of groggy, in fact.
It's a hectic event for sure, but I'm glad you made it back safe. And
safe-ish, I would say.
What is that supposed to mean?
We don't need to go into it, but there was some health issues that went down at E3 this year among the crew, and it wasn't always a smooth ride for us. But we had a lot of fun, and there should be a lot of cool E3 stuff on the site this week and coming next week. And oh shoot, I'm in the housekeeping already. I'm sorry, dude. Go ahead.
It's all good. It's easy to get excited for what's coming. But today though, this is a bit of a follow up to our Ultimate Weapon episode we did a while ago. Today we're going to be talking about super bosses. They're those optional bosses in video games that are meant to present kind of a final challenge for the most dedicated players. And they pop up. They come in all shapes and sizes, all forms, varieties. And today we're here to discuss just them in general. So one thing I was going to just pick everyone's brain about to start is, for these super bosses, what generally speaking makes them a good one? Is it like their difficulty, their significance in the game's story? What do we got?
Well, okay, both of those things I think are good places to start. If they have some kind of story connection, it's always welcome. I'm not saying it has to be, something that's foreshadowed in the first hour and then fought in the 100th hour, but having some level of connection to the world or story, I think enhances how fun and how well a super boss fits. And high difficulty should be part of it, but I mean, a difficulty that feels challenging and rewarding without feeling completely unfair. We can talk about some unfair ones a little bit later in the episode. But basically, challenging without feeling completely busted, some level of fitting within the world and story, and I think some tangible reward other than just a trophy or just them not being in the room anymore.
I think it's fair enough.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I think makes like really good optional bosses stand out from the others is that they sort of how do I put it, like uncover sort of like the world, because like most of the games that I play, they have like very well built worlds, but there's always some sort of like mystery surrounding them, and I like super bosses that sort of shine a light on those. So I guess story relevance is important as well, but like I like bosses that give you a new perspective on the story or on certain characters even.
And what about you, Gino? Do you have anything in particular you look for in an optional boss in video games?
Yes, I prefer a super boss that allows me to obtain the ultimate weapon from beating it. So I have no use for that ultimate weapon because I've already beat the ultimate boss of the game.
Right. So Yzmat is your favorite super boss, is what you're saying.
That or Julius, either or. In actuality, the story importance is nice, but what I want to see in a super boss besides that is a final encounter that allows me to use everything I have for these characters. I built them up level 99, they have the best equipment, max skills, have my ideal set going for them, and I want a ultimate challenge for that. I can't build them up anymore, and I just want to go in, have some sort of challenge at the end after maxing them all out and beating that super boss. That's what I like seeing in a super boss in a game. An ultimate challenge for an ultimate party of characters.
Yeah, I don't feel that way at all. A boss that makes you max out everything just as almost as a prerequisite feels overly cheap to me. But I also never ever max out characters in an RPG. By the time I get to the super boss, I'm ready to stop playing. But so that does probably just speaks to our specific tastes and preferences.
Well, I don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. If I can beat a bot, if I can beat super boss like level 70, that's perfectly satisfying with me too. But what I mean is like games where you get to level 99, but there's still a challenge to it. Like in Kingdom Hearts, where you get to max level, but there's still plenty of challenges to that too. So that's
Mm-hmm.
what I mean by that. Not like you have to max out everything. Like you could, but I'm saying like it's
Sure,
the
all
game's
right.
final challenge for everything you've done up to that point.
Yeah, like this is sort of and it's satisfying to clear, like this is a final test of skill rather
Yeah.
than you pushed all your, like this, it's more a test of skill rather than a reward for like time invested, so to speak. But it's funny on my end, it's interesting because for the longest time I never really bothered with optional content in games. I was usually pretty satisfied clearing this game's story and moving on. I find more recently though that I've been more interested in kind of uncovering everything a game has to offer. But no, I think you guys have all made pretty valid points as to why optional bosses in games can be interesting, gratifying, challenging, and they give certain things like I think there's an allure surrounding a lot of these characters, like the kind of things that people like, but this is before the time of a lot of us, but before there was internet, people would be like, if you fight, the secret enemy you fight in the game, a lot of that mystique is kind of still around these characters, even though you
Yeah,
can look up on, yeah,
sort of the cafeteria whisperings, like oh,
Yeah.
like let's say a game comes out, everyone's talking about the game for the first week, but by the time you get to the third week, there's the, oh shoot, did you hear about the secret boss at the end of the end of the end? And like that it does add a level of intrigue to what should be late in a game's play cycle, at least. I mean, like I will, most of the time in an RPG, I welcome a super boss hidden somewhere, especially if it hits all of those check marks that we went over a few minutes ago for what makes a good
yeah.
one.
I think it makes the game feel like there's more to it there. Like even though you've exhausted the main width of content, I think it helps make the world of the game feel a little bit more interesting. And generally speaking, that's more than always welcome. With that being said, I'm just going by the row of names on the bottom of my screen here. So I'm going to start with you, Dom. We have some examples listed here. What's an optional boss in the series or a specific game that you find to be very interesting?
All right. So if you know me, or if you've listened to the past couple of podcasts, you know that I'm a huge Dark Souls fan. And of course, I think the best super boss in the series by a wide margin is the Nameless King, who is the optional final boss in Dark Souls 3. And like, in order to even reach his area to begin with, you have to go through this like whole shenanigans of unlocking an emote and then emoting correctly at the right place to like get to that area, and then like
Wait.
you have to.
But you have to emote incorrectly at the right
Oh,
place?
you have to emote correctly.
I see.
At the right
Okay.
time.
Okay, you have to screw up in a very specific way,
No,
and
you
you
have
are
to-
rewarded with a new boss fight.
You have to emote very, very rudely and insult the king to get him to come down from his throne.
Exactly. Yeah, and like already his area is like hellacious. It's like it has some of the toughest enemies in the game and has some of the most ridiculous gauntlets. But like once you get to the final stage and you fight him, already his like entrance is like grand. He like flies in on a dragon and like he prepares to like spear you with his like with his like enormous lightning spear. But like so the first part that I really like is he's mechanically challenging because like unlike every other boss in the game, you can't sort of you have to properly react to his movement. And what I mean by this is that in Dark Souls, or Dark Souls 3 at least, you tend to like get into a rhythm. Like you see the boss swing their arm up and that's when you have to roll. Or that's when you have to roll to the side. That's when you can get in a free hit. But with the Nameless King, he has all these like really strange delays in his attacks. So he'll raise his spear up, and then you'll spend all your stamina bar like rolling around him like an idiot. and then once you're out of stamina and you can't roll, then he slams his spear down for like 3/4 of your health. So you have to like properly read his movements, which is really different. So it gives the fight already like a much different pace where you have to very methodically challenge him throughout the entire encounter. And then like on top of that, he has the whole significance of like, once you beat him, you're like, all right, so who was this guy exactly? And then as you explore the final boss area, you find the pieces sort of fall together that this guy is sort of like the lost son of the original Lord of Sunlight, Gwyn, who has been like talked about, and he's been in like lore, and he's like he has his own sort of like sect, or he has his own sort of like religion within the world of Dark Souls, and he's been like teased since the first game. And then like after you complete him, and then like, you explore his area, you're like, oh my god, this was the like the lost son of Gwyn. And like that whole reveal, I think was so on point, and was I thought was such a great way to sort of just finish out the main game without all like the DLC stuff. So I thought that, yeah, I think that's why I think the Nameless King is probably the best super boss of the Souls, or yeah, at least the main Souls series.
Yeah, Dark Souls in general is really good with filling its bosses with that sense of mystique we were talking about, and giving them a story significance. So yeah, I think it's cool that that Nameless King rewards players who've been invested in the universe, his lore for so long. I think that's really neat. I haven't played the Dark Souls 3 myself, but yeah, no, that's really neat, dude.
Yeah.
I haven't played any Dark Souls game, but it does seem cool that they paid off on a mysterious character that had been teased for multiple games in multiple years in the form of a really cool end boss fight.
Exactly.
Yeah, that seems. I bet that's really satisfying to Dark Souls players and to fans of the lore too.
All right. Well, I mean, so moving on from the realm of Dark Souls, let's move on to Gino. What's one you want to pick for this section?
Well, I want to talk about a franchise that actually doesn't have a lot of that isn't really known for super bosses, but has had some very difficult optional bosses in the recent games, and that's the Fire Emblem series.
Ooh.
More specifically, I would like to talk about a couple bosses from Awakening and Echoes. Starting off with Awakening, there's the boss Anna, who for Fire Emblem fans knows as the perky merchant who has a million sisters and is voiced by Igus. And the biggest thing with her is that to get to her, you have to get the DLC Apotheosis, which has incredibly strong enemies. These are enemies which even if you played the game on normal, casual, the lowest difficulty, all the enemies are on Lunatic Plus, the highest difficulty, and you have to go through and try and beat every stage as fast as you can. There's turn limits, and every enemy has Draco Shield, which halves damage on a lot of weapons. It's a very brutal DLC. But when you get to Anna, she's even worse, because not only can she counter your attacks by dealing half as much damage as you do to her back to you using counter, just has Rightful God, which is a skill that boosts her skill up. She has Ether, so she can heal. She's a really difficult boss, and the first time in a Fire Emblem game that we actually see a very difficult enemy to overcome. Because in Awakening, you have so many different skills. You have Limit Breaker, which increases your stats. You need Rally Spectrum, which increases your stats even more for a few turns. There is so much stuff that Fire Emblem Awakening has, but you need all of them to beat Apotheosis, its first stage and all 5 of its secret stages, just to beat Anna, and she's really difficult just to get through. Not even to get to her, but even when you do get to her, she's just really difficult as well.
Yeah, Awakening really sort of blew up Fire Emblem customization a little bit, because most of the games before it, I mean, I guess Sacred Stones is another exception. You're limited into how many battles you can do and how much experience and items there are to go around. But with Awakening, there's all kinds of solo grinding you can do. There's DLCs that give you better items than ever. There's basically more ways to pump up your characters than ever, in Awakening, and Apotheosis was almost the answer to that. It's like, yeah, we're giving you every opportunity to make powerful units, when in past games this would have been impossible. So here's the challenge that requires you to go to every level of exploitation in order to complete it at all. I have not done Apotheosis. I put a lot of time into Awakening, but I didn't really do much into the DLCs for it.
On the flip side with Fire Emblem, you have Anna, who is a character rooted into its lore and has been around for a long time, but Fire Emblem also has another boss in Fire Emblem Echo Shells of Valencia, which also can give to that mystique a little bit that we talked about. And as the Creation, which is the optional boss in Fire Emblem Echoes. After you beat the main game, you get into Chapter 6. You can go across the ocean to the area where Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon took place. Go over this very long 10-port dungeon, Phoebus Labyrinth. And at the end, you fight this giant black dragon called the Creation, which is stronger than the final boss. And has a lot of different enemies there that are really strong. Some people can't beat it on hard without using DLC. Some people can, and with it in its end, with the thing with it, you have no idea what this Creation is. As you go through the entire dungeon, you read these different text tablets that are in there, which are like research notes, going deeper about this experiment that you find. And eventually, you get to the bottom, and here's this big thing, this big dragon. But the thing is that a lot of people don't realize when they fight the boss for the first time, is that this boss looks very similar to the final boss of Fire Emblem Awakening, and they try to bring the connection between that and to what this boss comes in at the end of Echoes and everything.
Interesting. It is interesting, kind of tying it all together, because Echoes, that's the remake of Fire Emblem Gaiden, right?
Yeah, the second.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. So they try to give the super boss a bit more broader significance in the series' lore. That's really neat. Yeah, that does sound really cool. And I still have to play Echoes. This is after E3. People were telling me when I was bemoaning Fire Emblem Three Houses, like, but I hope it saves the franchise after Fates was like the worst game ever. And then they're like, oh, Peter, you got to play Echoes. It's really good, actually. And I'm like, I'll believe it when I see it.
I forget who played it for us, but I remember Derek was playing it for an episode of Random Encounter last year or 2 years ago, and he was encouraged by it. Like you, I was pretty turned off after playing through about half of both of the routes of Fates, and
yeah, you made it further than I did.
Yeah, I made it to like chapter like 19 or 20 for Conquest, and not quite as far for Birthright. But I was not impressed with Fates, and Echoes is supposed to be very different, but in a way a return to form. It was much more positively received by fans, at least from my perspective. And this discussion of this boss and really trying to connect the worlds of Fire Emblem together is at least encouraging. Awakening did a lot to try and connect the different continents and kingdoms and ages of Fire Emblem together. And I guess they're doing Nintendo's doing a good job of building a larger Fire Emblem lore with their recent games.
Give it a year, and we'll get the Fire Emblem Historia.
I would pre-order that. Like, give us nothing.
I would be interested in the Fire Emblem Historia.
Yeah. That think they're leaving money on the table. Yeah. So, but Mike, what about you? What's something on here you think is interesting?
Sure. Well, I think if we're doing a series by series discussion, I'll go over one that has a sort of a couple different kinds of super bosses, and that's the Tales series. Tales of Fantasia through Tales of Berseria through Tales of yet to be determined 2019 game.
Ooh, that's my favorite Tales game.
Right? I love how they announced that. They announced that they're making one, and there is a trademark for an old one somewhere, but they didn't give anything a name, so we'll probably get it by TGS in September. But there's a couple tacks that the Tales games take when it comes to super bosses. In, say, the remakes of Tales of Fantasia, not the Super Famicom version, but the ones that came after, there's a chain of quests that will lead you to a hidden super demon named Hades that after you defeat gives you a super powerful weapon and a new summon for Clarth. And then almost every Tales game from Eternia onward, or maybe even Destiny onward, has a cameo battle, usually fought in an arena, where you fight either NPCs from the current game or past heroes from earlier Tales games. I remember the one in Eternia was Kless from Fantasia if you're playing on normal, or Kless and Arche from Fantasia if you're playing on a harder difficulty, and the later ones will have you facing 4 random side characters from previous games. And all of those, like the sort of hidden bosses, like Hades or the Maxwell and Secundes summons in Eternia, those usually give very good rewards, and the cameo battles will usually give you at least one good piece of equipment as a reward. So those are always fun, and what the hidden summon is and what the hidden cameo battle is sort of a late game tradition with most of the Tales games going forward. I haven't played a new Tales game since Zillia, so I don't know what the cameo battles or hidden ones are in most of the recent ones. But when you do encounter them, they are fun and satisfying, and especially seeing the cameos are rewarding for longtime Tales fans. But another one that is I don't think it's in every Tales game, but several Tales games have sort of dark weapon quests or chaos weapon quests. They're often called different things in each game. In Symphonia, they're called oh shoot, I know the character's name is Abyssion, but were they?
The Devil's Arms.
Yeah, Devil Arms. Yeah, that's it. Many Tales games have sort of hidden weapons that have unusual properties, where they start out very weak and get stronger as you fight more and more enemies using them, and usually that side quest culminates in a pretty tough boss battle. The one in Tales of the Abyss is really awesome because it ties into Jade's story. Jade is one of the playable characters, with the final boss Nephilim being basically a homunculus of his dead teacher that he revived as when he was a reckless, slightly insane student. And so it takes a pretty dark, slightly Full Metal Alchemist tack.
I approve of this.
And it's a really cool boss battle with that isn't overtly challenging. I was able to do it without breaking my brain when I played the 3DS version last year. But it like a lot of the Tales endgame bosses do check those nice boxes. They have a story tie-in or a character tie-in and pretty good rewards. But really, I mean, the first one I remember was that arena battle against Kless in Eternia, where Kless is OP, guys. He's just really damn strong. And maybe actually no, the big one in Eternia is Secundes, who's an obvious he's obviously Daus, who's the final boss of Tales of Fantasia. And famously in Tales of Fantasia, Daus's big weakness the first time you fight him is the lightning spell Indignation. And so when you fight him in Tales of Eternia, he has 100,000 health, and when you get him down to 50,000, he starts charging up his ultimate attack. And if you give him about 10 seconds or so when he's under 50,000 HP, he'll wipe the party with a super move. But if you cast the Indignation spell in between him being under 50,000 and him doing that super move, you'll one-hit kill him, and then he'll join the party as the final summon.
Ooh.
And Indignation, Indignation is not like the ultimate end-all be-all spell in that game. It's a strong lightning spell, but it's because it's Daus's legendary weakness. It's what you have to use against Secundes.
That's hilarious. I love it.
And he's the Kramel of time. So I think Secundes is a Japanese transliteration of the word seconds or second. Mm-hmm. But it's a fun boss battle that if you don't know the mechanic, you might be screwed. But it's pretty satisfying to execute.
Going on some of the cameo battles that he's talking about. Also, come on, Indignation is like the most famous attack from Tales, so it's kind of hard not to be able to use it.
It's the ultimate lightning spell in a bunch of Tales games.
Yeah. Going forward with some of the newer Tales games and some of the cameo battles as they are, one of the biggest things with Tales games is that every Tales game has a major labyrinth/gauntlet dungeon at the end of it, where you either use the Devil Arms to get through to them, or there's some other requirement to get through them. And throughout those dungeons, you will fight some of the cameo battles. Like, for example, in Graces, you had to fight Kohaku and Riella for Tales Destiny 2. Caucus from Tales of Hearts. In Tales of Xillia 2, you had to fight Kless and the main character of Tales of Destiny. I can't remember.
Oh, Kyle.
Yeah,
Wait,
Kyle.
no. Kyle is his son.
Yeah, that's Tales of Destiny 2.
No. Stan, Kless and Stan. Yeah.
There we go.
Kyle is Stan's son, and they look
Yes.
kind of the same. My bad.
Yes. Yeah. After that, after doing that, like in Graces, you get to fight those. In Graces, you get to fight those two in Vague from Tales of Rebirth at the top of the arena. In Tales of Xillia 2, you fight those two, Mint and one other character I can't remember. In the arena. But the best thing about these are battles that are unlocked after fighting the Gauntlet dungeon, and after the Gauntlet dungeon, being the boss of that dungeon, and you see like, oh, here's this cameo battle that's still amazing. You have to get through it all. Those type of battles where you beat the super boss, but then you have a huge battle afterwards is really awesome. And by the way, that cameo battle in Tales of Xillia 2 is so hard because you're fighting four characters in previous games, and one of them has a unique Mystic Art. Is
it Kless using Soul Forge or Soul
no,
Steel?
It's Kless and Stan using their own version of Final Fury.
Oh, okay.
Huh.
Yeah. Kless gets teleportation and like blade extending moves in Fantasia. It's stupid. Kless is OP.
My favorite cameo boss though is after the Gauntlet battle in Tales of Vesperia, you fight an enemy called Traitor to Heaven, which for those who don't know is Kraus Aryan from Tales of Symphonia. So after after you beat him, so when you go for this huge dungeon, after you beat him, you get a letter unlocking the 100-man gauntlet at the end, and you saw this huge battle afterwards you got to go through in order to gain even more of a challenge. So even after completing these gauntlet dungeons, the challenge in Tales isn't done for like a little bit, and that's what I like about a lot of super bosses in Tales in that regard.
Top 10 anime betrayals.
Yeah.
It will never not amuse me that Tails has a Kratos.
The one that amused me the most is that there's a character who totally isn't a traitor in Tales of Destiny 2 named Judas. Nope.
Oh.
He's not a traitor at all. Absolutely not.
There's a traitor in most Tales games.
Yes, there really is.
Lysenderoth, you were behind this. Well, before we move on to the next series, actually, I did want to ping back to you, Dom, and ask if there were any more Dark Souls bosses you wanted to spotlight. Because I've heard this series has a pretty good legacy of boss fights.
Yeah, sure. Well, if you're going to stay with Dark Souls 3, you have Champion Gundyr, who is the upgraded version of the tutorial boss that you fight, who is also known to be pretty tough to begin with. But
That's clever.
But this version is absolutely I feel like he already has all the prerequisites of being sort of interesting from the lore perspective, as the place you travel to in order to fight him is sort of like a time travel thing to begin with, where you sort of go back in time and see what the world was like, kind of like a couple hundred years before you came there. And Champion Gundyr is the original sort of person who's supposed to do the whole, ignite the first flame and keep the world going and all that stuff. But he failed. So he
you do.
Yeah, and but he failed. So he's standing as the guardian. He's supposed to judge everyone who comes to try and do what he did. And the thing is that this guy, so you first encounter him, and if you beat the first boss, you might be like, oh, this guy's gonna be pretty easy. The first boss wasn't too big of a deal, but then you fight him and you get him to half health, and then his eyes start glowing red, and you're like, uh-oh, what did I just awaken? And this guy goes from swinging his spear once or twice, then dodging, go to straight up full on Mortal Kombat comboing you to death. He'll hit you with the butt of his spear or his halberd, and you go flying up in the air. And before you can come down, he'll either full on check you with his shoulder, or he'll kick you in the face. So it's the first Dark Souls boss that straight up combos you to death, and it's a very intense fight. And unfortunately, you can cheese it if you're good at parrying, because then because you can parry every single one of his attacks, and parries have super long you parry him, and then you get stunned for like 10 seconds or whatever. So you have a super long time to deal a lot of damage to him. But if you don't parry him, it's like a very, very intense twist, I guess, on a familiar boss.
I kind of like it when games do that, because
Yeah.
when they take an easy enemy or an enemy that's like kind of early game and make it like super challenging later on, I think that's kind of fun.
Can I give one example of a super boss that is that exact thing? That isn't even on our list. I just thought of it right now.
Hey, go ahead, man.
One of my favorite Super Nintendo or Super Famicom games, Seiken Densetsu 3, which is the sequel to Secret of Mana 2. There's a hidden boss in only one of the 3 story paths that is a Rabite, as in the very weakest enemy you fight at the beginning of the game. But it's a black Rabite that can cast powerful spells, heals itself to full if you see it flash a certain way, and deals preposterous damage. But it's just a black skin of a regular Rabite, and it doesn't even give you a good reward. It's a very silly cameo, but it does do that very amusing trope of an early enemy that has been ratcheted up to a super level.
I like that. That's fun.
I got an example of that in Yeast later, but I'll talk about that later.
I have a couple DiGioia examples of that, but again, we're gonna save that for later.
We'll swing around.
Maybe we should get to the later. Otherwise, we'll be here for 3.5 hours.
Well, okay, so I'm going to talk about Kingdom Hearts now.
Okay, it's time to leave.
Mike flips table.
No, I'm just going to mute my mic.
The one thing I wanted to specify, because I just in my preparation for Kingdom Hearts 3, I recently replayed Kingdom Hearts 2, and the thing about vanilla Kingdom Hearts 2 when it came out is that I feel like it kind of lacked a lot of endgame level content. Like you had the one optional fight, which was Sephiroth, a reprise of Sephiroth and he does a lot of damage. He's tough, but it's a pretty manageable fight, all things considered. Like, once you figure out his moveset, then it's not really much of a problem. So when the Final Mix version came out in Japan, which I consider Final Mix to be probably one of the best director's cuts of a game ever, and they added a whole bunch of stuff. They added new cutscenes, new enemies, this whole new endgame challenge, optional dungeon. You get to fight replica versions of all the organization members that have new attacks, new patterns, and a whole lot more HP. And then you have a Lingering Will, which is kind of the final ultimate endgame challenge. Lingering Will is cool because from a gameplay and lore perspective, he's really neat. He's able to gameplay wise, he's an end game level challenge. You're going to want to be level 99. You're going to want to have the best equipment, and he's still going to put up a pretty fair fight. Although I've seen people do level 1 runs of him, and it's kind of amazing. But he's also, the interesting thing about him is that he's designed to counter the way a lot of the main Kingdom Hearts 2 game is played, because main Kingdom Hearts 2 is not a terribly challenging game. It's got some spikes here and there, some tough boss fights, but for the most part, you can pretty much button mash your way through a lot of it. With Lingering Will, he has counters for long combo strings. If you get greedy and try to go in for too many hits on your combo, he'll punish you for that with this really wide-reaching whip attack. His moveset is completely random. While he does telegraph all of his attacks, the order in which he does them is random, and sometimes he won't do certain moves until the second phase of the fight, at which point he has like a desperation move that goes on for a full minute, and he'll teleport in and out of combo strings, which is ridiculous.
Wonderful.
Yeah. He has he can lock your commands temporarily, which requires you to play a little mini game to get them unlocked while he's busy wailing on you.
Yep.
Yeah, no. He literally freezes your command menu, and you have to pick the right command option as it randomly cycles through them. Fortunately, unlike the Kingdom Hearts 1 variant of this boss, the Unknown, his random command wheel slows down over time, so you actually do have it's pretty easy to break out of. And then he can also this is the hardest thing about this fight is that he will randomly if he hits you with a certain attack, he will curse you and either completely seal off your physical attacks or completely seal off magic and items.
This boss sounds like such shenanigans. What the heck?
It's tough.
It's a very challenging fight, but also very rewarding because one thing I really like about this fight is that it never feels unfair. You always can tell this is what I need to do in this situation. All of his attacks have a very clear telegraph, and it really is kind of just a matter of recognizing his moves, knowing how to handle them when they come up. Like you can block or dodge every hit in his desperation move if you get the timing down. And the fight probably does demand that. That's really interesting. And from a story perspective, it's also really cool because it ties into Birth by Sleep, the then unreleased prequel game. The boss is Terra from Birth by Sleep. It's what's left of him. His heart is sealed within his suit of Keyblade armor from the end of Birth by Sleep, and it's waiting there for you to find. And that's just really cool to see. The little lore connections there to that fight. You're fighting in the Keyblade graveyard, and it's just a really neat final fight.
One great thing about Kingdom Hearts, as Peter said, when regards to Lingering Well, is that a lot of bosses have ties to future Kingdom Hearts events. Like, for example, the Unknown from Kingdom Hearts 1 is Xemnas, the main villain of Kingdom Hearts 2.
And that fight is awesome.
The alternate bosses in Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep pertain to enemies in future Kingdom Hearts, like Mysterious Enemy is Young Xehanort, and going from there. And the best thing about all that is that as Kingdom Hearts moves forward, the optional bosses build on the game's lore slowly but surely, leading up to when you actually see them. And also considering you have to beat the super bosses in order to obtain the alternate ending for the secret endings for a lot of these games, it's really useful to see how each game progresses.
Yeah, that's it for real. Kingdom Hearts has quite a lot of really challenging super bosses, and it is like you said, Gino, it's really fun how they build on the story in new and interesting ways. I'm curious to see what 3 is going to do.
I think it's Dom's turn now. Is that true?
Yeah, it is definitely Dom's turn. Dom, what do you got for me?
All right, so straying a bit away. Well, like I mentioned that I find lore to be a pretty significant aspect of super bosses that I like, but I think a notable exception that I have to this is the raid bosses in Borderlands 2. Because Borderlands 2, even on like Ultimate Vault Hunter, I think it was Ultimate Vault Hunter mode. That's the highest difficulty. Even on that mode, you can it's pretty easy once you have like a very good, if you just get a single good gun. But I really like the raid bosses because they're tough and they really push your characters to their limits, which is something I think is sort of lacking in a lot of games these days. Because traditionally raid bosses are always sort of like, oh, you have to gather like a 16-man party, you have to like coordinate and have like voice comms going and everything, right, and draw aggro correctly and stuff. But Borderlands 2's raid bosses are different in that you can party up to take them down and do all that sort of shenanigans with the drawing aggro and stuff. But they're easy enough, or I guess quote unquote easy enough, that you can solo them if you're good enough and your characters and if you build your character correctly. And I feel like that's sort of how do I call it, sort of flexibility with how you can approach the boss is something that I really appreciated in Borderlands 2, and I really enjoyed as sort of like the final content, as the real final end game. Because the main boss of Borderlands 2 was just kind of a snore fest, really. It's just sort of waiting around and waiting for him to pop up to shoot him in his weak spots. But
the whack-a-mole of end bosses.
Exactly. And to make it work, and to make it even better, he has, the end boss just slings lava at you while you can't fire at him at all. So you have to just play a game of dodge. But for at least the 2 raid bosses in the main game, which are Terramorphous, the Invincible, and for Mivorous, the Invincible, I feel like they're all they're tough but approachable enough to do solo, and they can give you very good rewards, which makes also like repeatedly fighting them very rewarding. So
Right,
yeah.
yeah, like grinding the
Hmm.
raid battles to get like prestige items or whatnot. It's like a big thing in MMOs and stuff like that.
Exactly.
So that's kind of cool. Yeah,
And like
sounds.
they don't necessarily add anything to the lore, but I just found them so enjoyable on a sort of gameplay level. I feel like I should mention them here.
Yeah, for sure, man. Hey,
Mm.
that sounds neat. And I wasn't. I didn't even consider. I didn't even consider Borderlands when we were thinking this one up. So yeah, thanks for that.
I hadn't even really considered raid
G.
bosses as a kind of super boss, but that makes a lot of sense with a lot of different MMOs, including
Mhm.
Borderlands, which has sometimes an MMO structure. Basically, the raid or the current top raid would be the available super boss that is
Hmm.
only
Mhm.
for not the faint of heart.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's the same with like the bosses from FF14. You know, they always add like here's
Oh
a
yeah.
high level new thing with every patch. And that's cool. Yeah.
And we can talk about that when if we get to Final Fantasy later. But yeah, Gino, you pick the next topic.
Yeah, before I do that, as well, I'm just having war flashbacks from the 20 tries I took against the raid boss in Borderlands 1, Cromrex Invincible, when I tried soloing him with the sniper class,
There's a
and
lot
just
of
realized,
invincible people in
yeah,
Borderlands.
yeah,
Jeez.
and I just realized that was a terrible idea because having a pale sniper fight a giant monster with one weak spot, having super armor and no cover was a very bad idea on my part.
Yeah.
Anyways, next series on the list is what I want to talk about is Yeast. Or East? What'd you tell me?
East.
Really? East?
Yep.
Uh, my experience of East in the last 4 years has proven to me be, hey, look at these really difficult bosses that I do not want to spend 100 tries trying to beat. And
East bosses
recently,
are huge and beautiful and awesome.
no, they are, and I love them so much. That's why I love the series so much. But they're so hard, even on normal. For example, I've only up to this point I've only been able to beat two of the super bosses in East. That was the one in Memory Salsetta, which is called the
Oh yeah, the one in Celceta is pretty near the starting area of the game.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
I accidentally ran into him.
Hmm.
yeah the Foria Deros, which for some weird reason I'm like when I was fighting him, I was able to get through the entire game without really using the guard button that much. So when I fought him, I'm like, oh no, I'm dying. So I went up, attacked him, went back, healed, and just kept going back and forth because I couldn't dodge his attacks. His attacks are all AOE, and it was just so weird for me to do that. So and now I'm actually not with members of Select coming on PC this summer. I'm like, okay, I'm actually going to guard this time when I fight that guy because I want to play that game on hard. Another boss I fought was when the PC version of 60 Arc of Fishdom came out, which is Majun, which is a fairy found in an underground area of the game, and the only way to beat that thing is using good old lightning spells because is using the lightning sword because the weirdest thing about East bosses is that when you fight them, they're complete bullet hell. Everything,
Yeah, it's more about dodging than landing hits 90% of the time.
yeah, and that was what was Majun. I just charged up the lightning sword, attacked it, and just kept running away as I kept fighting it. And it was a
Solid.
really yeah, it was a really difficult boss. However, the really difficult bosses that take a lot to unlock, I have to say, is the optional bosses in 3, the Alpha Falgana. Those bosses are really difficult. First off, you got I think Reinhard.
I
I
don't
think
remember the. Oh wait, is it the guy at the top of the mountain, the martial arts dude?
yeah, him. You
Oh
have to
him, yeah. I never
yeah,
tried that.
you
I
have
heard it was brutal though.
Oh, it gets worse. In order to unlock him, you have to either A, beat the game on hard. No, you have to beat the time trial at any difficulty, I think, in order to unlock him. And he's super difficult just because his attacks has almost no lag on him, and so you have to wait until he's done attacking, finish him off as soon as you can, and be able to get through that. I I still can't beat him even now, but that boss was just insane. However, there is another super boss in Vagan that's even harder. And the only way to unlock it is to beat the game on Infernal difficulty.
Oh
And
dear.
I have not done that. Nope.
that is the Black Pickard. The Black Pickard is...
Wait. Pickards are like
Yep,
small, tiny animals.
I know.
So it's like the Black Rabbit Returns. Okay.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
Empire
That's what
Strikes Back.
It's the boss I was talking about. It's a small black hamster / pig creature that is like barely the size of like a grape on the screen, and it's just hitting you with a crap ton of blasts coming from all over the place. And it has I think it has an extra 1,000 HP, even has 1,000 more HP than the final boss on Infernal mode. And not only does it hit hard, it's a time trial boss, so you have a set level, you have set items. Luckily, they give you the ultimate equipment, but it's just a very difficult boss that I can't get to because I barely even beat the game on Nightmare. But just watching the footage of the boss just shows like how just difficult it is right off the bat.
It's like, yeah, no, you good. You
You
live this day, weird hamster monster.
Funny enough, there actually is another optional boss in East Origin, which you can only obtain from beating either all 3 games on Nightmare mode with the 3 main characters, or beating them on Nightmare and beating on any difficulty using their alternate versions. But that boss is so elusive that I can't find footage of it, even though I know it exists through wiki and guides. And I want to fight that boss so bad, but I can't.
I'm not even sure what you're referring to. But then again, I only beat East Origin once on normal and then once on hard. Because there's a hard between normal and Nightmare, right?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. I didn't do Nightmare. I did once in normal and once in hard, and that's it. So I'm nowhere close to unlocking that thing. But I wasn't even aware of it existing.
Yeah, it exists. It's really weird. But yeah, I know there's a super boss in Ys 8, but I have no idea about it because I haven't fought it yet because I haven't played it enough. But let's just say that Ys super bosses are a thing, and man, are they hard.
Sounds like it. Well, yeah, man. Ys is a series is very arcadey, so I feel like they've got that lineage to uphold, I suppose, of devouring all of your quarters.
Well, I mean, they don't technically have an arcade lineage, but sometimes the combat does feel arcadey.
Yeah,
especially
that's more what I meant. Yeah, it's like it's got this like, because I feel like with Ys, you can sit down and play a single combat session, and like you have a good time, and it's pretty easy to like get into that. It's fast paced, it's flashy.
Oh yeah, it's definitely fast paced and flashy, and you're collecting coins and making money hitting the ground kind of sounds all the time as you're collecting all the things that enemies drop.
But you also got to pay attention, and it can be demanding. So it sounds like that'd be a series rife for challenging fights. So do you have another series you'd like to spotlight, Mike?
Do I? I'm just going to go with it right now. Dragon Quest, possibly my favorite series of RPGs. Almost all of them from 3 onward have a super boss of some form snuck in. And I won't go through all of them, but there's a lot of them, and they're excellent. In Dragon Quest 3, or at least the Super Nintendo and Game Boy Color versions of it, there's a hidden dragon you can fight near the end of the game who grants you a wish every time you defeat it. And with each wish you get a new reward, and eventually I think it runs out of items to give you, and you can just keep fighting it anyway. And similarly, there's a monster called the Egg Dragon at the end of Lufia 2, which I think is a direct reference to the Wish Dragons in Dragon Quest, because it does the same thing. You fight it over and over. It's slightly stronger each time. You get a new reward, a new special wish every time you beat it, and until it runs out, and then gives you the ultimate weapon and ultimate accessory at the very end. In Dragon Quest 4, you don't fight a drag. In the remake of it, there's these 2 very silly bandits that I think they're called Chicken and Egg or something. But after you beat them once, you get you revive a certain character that's been defeated, and he becomes the secret character that's exclusive to the DS version of Dragon Quest IV. And then if you fight Chicken and Egg over and over, you get that character's ultimate equipment. With 1 piece every time you defeat them. In Dragon Quest V, I don't think there's a super boss in the Super Famicom version of the game, but in later ones you can play you can play special pachisi or basically special board games that give you extra rewards that end up with you getting like little monster versions of two of the game's major bosses, which is a cool little reference. Dragon Quest VI has probably the most famous super boss in Dragon Quest. There's a demon that you encounter in the distant past in one dungeon in the game, and at the very end of Dragon Quest VI, you can encounter that cameo demon. It's called Nightmare in Japanese, and I think Nocturnus when he's shown up in English.
Oh, I heard that one.
Yeah, he's a big mean guy with a spear. He's also one of the tougher legacy bosses in Dragon Quest 12. I'm sorry, in Dragon Quest 9. But he's
Say we skipped 11 already.
No. I don't think 12's been announced yet. I'd be the first person on that news if it were true. In Dragon Quest 7 has my favorite super boss in Dragon Quest history, because the story of Dragon Quest 7 is that there was a conflict between a demon named Orgodamir and then God, who's renamed Almighty in the 3DS version of Dragon Quest VII.
Aww.
And the way the story goes is basically the two fought to a draw, and Orgodamir was sealed away, and then God left his creation. And there's been churches in place worshiping God or the Almighty in its place. And Dragon Quest VII is sort of about how Orgodamir managed to return and was slowly consuming the whole world, and you and your party rebuild the world island by island and piece by piece, reversing the evil work that the demon and his army did. And he's the final boss of the game, and there's a more religion than usual in Dragon Quest VII compared to other games in the series. But the super boss after you beat the game is you find God's resting place, and determined that either he was still resting or he had sort of become apathetic over the years, and he asked if you want to challenge him, and you get to fight this toga wearing, very Santa Claus Zeus looking guy who's called God or the Almighty as the hidden super boss. And you can look it up if you want. He's a very cuddly looking god, but he's the super boss of Dragon Quest VII and has a story connection that I found very interesting.
JRPGs. Yeah, we're all about a group of teenagers teaming up to fight God. Dragon Quest VII. Hold my beer.
Okay. It's to be fair, it's 4 teenagers, 1 wolf that was transformed into a young boy, and 1 old crotchety knight that was turned to stone for centuries before being revived.
But how old is the crotchety knight? Because he can't be old unless he's over 30.
No, he's old. He has one of those Akira Toriyama mustaches. He's right there with Master Roshi.
Oh, he's one of. Mm-hmm. Oh, he's one of the 5 faces Toriyama can draw. Okay,
yep.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And let's see, Dragon Quest VII stars young Goku, Dragon Quest VIII stars young Gohan, and Dragon Quest XI stars Android 17.
Yeah,
I love it.
3 more Toriyama faces. But yeah, Dragon Quest VIII has a really cool story tie-in. It's by going through this area called the Dragovian Trials, the hero discovers his heritage, and you unlocks a second ending to the game, or a third ending, or a third optional ending if you're playing the 3DS version. And it does a similar thing to Dragon Quest III, where you can fight a series of dragons over and over for increasing rewards. And it's really satisfying, and I think has a really cute resolution to the hero character's arc. And it also reveals that the hero's father's name is Eltrio, which I always thought was a neat RPG name, and I use the name Eltrio for created characters often. Dragon Quest IX. Oh boy, you unlock a set of bosses called Legacy Bosses eventually in Dragon Quest IX through optional maps that you can get via a couple quests in game or via Street Pass. And those optional bosses are the final bosses of the previous 8 Dragon Quest games, plus 4 others that are minor bosses, like Nocturnus is one of them, like Murdoch from 6, and Baramos from Dragon Quest III are in it. But basically, all of the biggest bosses from the previous 8 Dragon Quest games are unlockable bosses. You can fight them over and over. Every time you beat one, they'll give you some small trivial item, and you can choose to either take the experience for yourself or give the experience back to the legacy boss. And if you choose to give it back, then they will gain 1 level, become stronger, and give you a better chance of dropping better items. So you can fight these 12 bosses over and over and over, level them up to 99, and use all of the rare drops from them to forge the best equipment in the game, or goofy cameo equipment that lets you dress up as the hero from Dragon Quest 3 or whatever. Oh, sorry. I've been going on a bit.
Are those still accessible now that the Wi-Fi on the DS is gone?
The DS's network is gone, so you can't use the online shop. You can't download new quests, but if you do have the quests already downloaded, you can get those maps, and I think Street Passing still works, because a local Wi-Fi and multiplayer will work on it. So if someone has those maps, they can give them to somebody else. But again, I think Dragon Quest IX is a slightly incomplete game if it does not have those online features. So unless you have access or a friend that can help you with it, I don't recommend playing Dragon Quest IX cold, because I think it's a below average game for the series without those online features. But yeah, that's 9 Dragon Quest games in a row, or 7, since 1 and 2 don't really have super bosses. And thanks for letting me pop off a little bit about it, guys.
It's all good. It's all good. It's what we bring you on here for, Mike.
I think I need some smelling salts.
Well, I think that we can probably give everybody another pass on these, and then we get into some negatives. So stay tuned for that. But let's talk about Final Fantasy. Who's fought some Final Fantasy super bosses?
Me.
Oh boy.
All right. Well, lay into them. What do we got here?
Okay, I'm kidding. I actually haven't fought that many, but I haven't. The most recent ones I fought were those in 13 and 15. More specifically, the good old Vercingetorix from the final...
Vercingetorix or whatever.
Yeah, the final...
Vercingetorix?
The final thief mission in Final Fantasy 13.
Okay, well, Vercingetorix is the name of a famous Gaulish leader that fought the Romans.
Mm-hmm. He was executed by Caesar.
Yeah, and I think he might be a minor character in the Asterix comics as well.
He's at the end of that long string of hunt quests in 13, right?
Huh.
Yeah, which is annoying because that guy has a lot of weird abilities that can make things really difficult. Luckily, I was able to stall it and kill him without much of a problem. However, the boss right after it, which for some reason is stronger, is the Longui, which even at max, even if you max out all your stats and everything, it's still, you can't beat him normally. You have to use some cheesy stuff. For example, I used the death counter where you have Vanilla in front, you summon her, Eidolon, then after that you just keep spamming death with the Genji glove on, dealing crap loads of damage until it dies. That's pretty much the best way you can kill it at that point.
13 was kind of lacking in optional content, but the stuff that was there definitely it got a bit of a rep.
I don't know, the Thief missions weren't too bad. I didn't mind exploring Pulse and going for all that. It actually had a lot of good lore. Exploring
Pulse was interesting. I think it highlights that. It highlights 13's incomplete nature, but it's definitely one of the better parts of the game.
Speaking of incomplete, Final Fantasy 15.
You're saying that just to wound me, Gino.
RPG Fan Game of the Year 2016.
It's because it's a good game. It is missing a lot of it is clearly missing a lot of corners.
I'm still mad about that. Anyways, so I haven't fought the Adamantoise, but I have fought the level 120 super boss in that game. And the main thing with him is that there is a quest line that you get from this blacksmith in one of the towns.
He's in Lestalem. I know the guy you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a guy in Lestalem, and he gives you a bunch of quests. You have to go kill these enemies, and eventually you get to this level 120 super boss. And of course, this was when I fought him. It was before the level 120 gap level increase that happened in the game. So I'm level 99, and I had a little bit of trouble trying to beat him. His name's Naglfar, and he's pretty difficult trying to beat him. But there is a way to beat him, even with with that, and that is grinding up materials to obtain the Ultra Magic. So pretty much all you need to do is go fight the rock on top of a nearby mountain, and grind materials that the thing drops. Craft it into magic, which gives you Ultra Magic, and just keep spamming it, and it deals like 100,000 damage per hit. And eventually you'll be able to kill the super boss by just spamming magic, and it was really fun.
I did finish that quest chain in 15. Yeah, the Adamantoise fight too is that one's not. It's a super boss, but I hesitate to even because it's a dumb fight. Like I hesitate to even call it like it's the fight against the Adamantoise is this enemy is so big that you're going to spend half of the fight clipping inside of it. Like it's really badly optimized. I was not a fan, but I did beat it. So
there actually is a harder boss in Final Fantasy 15 that was introduced recently through the limited time quest, which is called the Dread Behemoth. It's level 140. It's immune to magic, which means I can't do the same stuff I did before, and it's a super difficult boss that I haven't been able to fight because it's a limited time quest. But from just standard looking at it, it would take a normal person maybe 10 minutes to kill. The entire area is foggy. It's just as well.
I wasn't really a big fan of that one. Although it's actually interesting. The limited time quests are a whole other can of worms because that's part of their whole weird games as a service thing. But what is interesting is that the DLC episodes for 15 have actually had some pretty interesting optional content added. There's each one has an EX version of one of the main boss fights or against another character. So in Gilgamesh you can fight Kor. In Gladio's episode you can fight Kor. In Prompto's episode you can fight Aranea. And in Ignis's episode you can fight Noctis. And those fights are all really fun and really challenging.
I wonder you fight in episode, and I wonder who you're gonna fight in episode Arden when that comes out.
I'll be curious to see how they'll work that in. And then Prompto also adds in a Dread Behemoth, and Ignis has the optional super fight with Arden, which is a really awesome fight that actually you have to make good use of his movement abilities, which I thought was very interesting. But even then, 15's had a lot of content added to it, and there's quite a bit of endgame level content for people who are interested in diving into that now. But let's talk about another Final Fantasy, though. Has anyone here fought Ruby Emerald Weapon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was many years ago when I last did it, but I have beaten both of them.
I have not, unfortunately, but I haven't even finished 7, so I can't really say that.
And well, that'll be Gino's final episode of Retro Encounter. Thanks for playing, fellas.
Where are those site credentials?
Yeah, well, while you guys were discussing 15, I was trying to think back in time a little bit and figure out what the first Final Fantasy Super Boss was, and I mean, Final Fantasy games do have late game bosses. Like Bahamut is a late fought boss in both Final Fantasy 3 and Final Fantasy 4, who's hidden, but I don't know if he qualifies as an end game super boss. I think the first one that definitely counts as a super boss is Omega and Shinryu from Final Fantasy 5.
Yeah,
because those two mofo's are right there in the final dungeon. They're not hard to find, but they are way harder than the final boss of the game, and yield significant rewards for beating them. But you really need to go in there with a strategy to even stand a chance. Like I think to beat Omega, because he fires a super damaging heat beam with you basically every 0.75 turns. You have to have everybody equip a fire ring, or you're basically toasted. And Shinryu, the only way I was able to beat him was to give everybody like 2 dragon spears and equip the dragoon class and just jump on him constantly, because otherwise you're gonna get wiped in seconds if you have anyone standing on the field for very long at a time. And I'm sure there's other strategies, but you can exploit class combos in FF5 in fun ways to get a lot of things done. But I think those are probably the 2 earliest Final Fantasy super bosses.
Actually, there might be one. There actually might be one that.
Oh, you're talking about the War Mech in FF1?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Because the War Mech, because while it isn't exactly considered to be like a super boss, but it is still a very powerful enemy that is very rare to encounter. and has attacks that are higher than most of the bosses.
Yeah,
in the game.
it's not as strong
Even
as the final boss of the game, but it is stronger than basically every other enemy. And you acquire I think you fight it only as a random battle, and I think only in like the top floor of where Tiamat is. I think.
yeah, yeah,
It's
in Tiamat's Dungeon, yeah.
yeah, it's in a very specific place and a very low encounter rate. I think it's War Mech in the original FF1, and they might have renamed it War Machine or something for later ones. It's been a long time. Okay, it hasn't been that long. I played Final Fantasy 1 for the podcast last year, in fact. So, but I did not seek out War Mech in that playthrough.
They've done a lot of. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say they've done a lot of retroactive, because in re-releases of the older Final Fantasy games, they usually add some content in, and they've gotten a lot of like post-game dungeons. They'll add like Final Fantasy 1 got a whole bunch of optional dungeons with bosses from previous Final Fantasies,
including Shinryu and Omega.
Yeah, and then on PSP they added the Chronodia. They added 1 to 2 as well, though I don't remember what that one was called. I think it was a Behemoth or something.
I don't remember what the boss was, but the area that you fought was you took 4 characters that had died during the course of FF2 and led them through sort of an underworld kind of stage. But I don't remember what the boss was. It was I've in fact blocked much of FF2 out of my memory.
And in 6 they brought back that dummied out enemy though, and actually finished the quest line.
Yep, the Tsar Dragon or Kaiser Dragon, which is now in the post game Super Dungeon. It was supposed to be, I think, the end of that of the 8 Crusader Dragons, or perhaps an optional boss in Kefka's Tower. But it's dummied out and might have a reference in Super Mario RPG.
Weirdly enough, for further details, see Retro Encounter.
3
Super Mario RPG: Legend of the Seven Stars Part 2.
Hey, sorry, you were saying?
Yep.
3 also added the Iron Giant in the 3D remake.
Yeah, but can you access that anymore on DS?
Yes, you still can.
Oh yeah? Okay,
Yeah.
because I thought it was through that Magnet feature, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, but Magnet only works. Yes, but the quest system from that, if I remember correctly, works through the Magnet still works through the game's timer, not actually the game's timer, not actually everything else. Because if that's the case, then you don't get Onion Knight, and that's a huge thing in Final Fantasy. Also, the 3D remake is on
It's on PC and PSP, so you could
figure
probably
it
out
okay.
that way.
Fair enough. Okay. Yeah. But and then later entries, I feel like after Ruby and Emerald Weapon, it kind of just became a thing in the series where, okay, we're going to add this boss that has a zillion hit points, and it's going to be like you get the one in Final. I kind of hate how the one in Final Fantasy VIII just kind of like shows up in the final dungeon. But
and
it is there.
It's annoying that you have to deliberately not over level to beat it.
Yeah, that's also really dumb.
It'll cast level 5 death near the beginning of the fight every time, and if any of your characters are maxed out to level 100, then peace, word to your mother.
Seriously? Oh, that sucks.
That
goes like completely against.
8 is dumb and broken, and Square, if you're going to remake anything, 8 actually needs it.
There's the old "if it isn't broke, don't fix it" thing. 8 is kind of broke. Please fix it.
Yeah.
And it's funny. 9 has a couple super bosses. It's got Ozma and Hades, and I think I think I read somewhere that Hades was probably the original final boss.
Yeah, the final boss of 9 is Necron, which is some vague, like the vague incarnation of death or the void. And I think having Hades as sort of like the god of death was their originally intended final boss. And and I think he's also a reference to an older FF game. Is Hades in FF3 or 1 or something? I forget.
I think I saw Hades earlier. Let me double check.
I think he's in FF3 doing something crazy because Final Fantasy 9 is full of references to classic games. But that I have heard that same rumor, Peter. I don't know how true it is, but Hades would make more sense than Necron because Necron makes even less sense than DC Comics Necron.
All I'm saying is that Black Lantern Zidane needs to be a thing like now.
I would love to encounter multicolored spectrum lanterns of all the Final Fantasy characters.
It looks like Hades was only in 9 from what I can tell.
Sure.
I see. Okay.
Still, he's cooler than Necron, and I would also like to see very much like Terra as a Green Lantern. That'd be pretty great.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of the. I'm saving some of the other games for our negative
Oh,
discussion
yep,
because
sure.
oh
I
boy, do I
understand.
have words.
12.
Do I have words? So let's move. Let's move on from the final fantasies of the world, and let's see, Dom. I think you're next on my list. You got give me one more franchise that you want to talk about.
I guess this is technically a different franchise with Bloodborne. I guess.
Go for it. Go for
Yeah.
it.
Since
Fear the old
Bloodborne
blood.
has like I think like 4 or 5 mandatory bosses to beat the game. They have a lot of optional bosses, and I think by far the best one is probably Gurman, the first hunter, who is who he's the end boss of one of the optional, or he's the end boss of one of the endings in the game. And what's great about it is that, like, you've come this far, and Gurman says, "All right, you can wake up from this nightmare with me killing you, but it's not explicitly stated, but you can choose to reject what Gurman has to offer." And what ensues is that he then busts out his scythe, and then you engage in this one-on-one battle. And one thing I just love about the fight is that, beyond the gameplay, is just the setting of the fight is so well done, because you're in the hunter's dream, and you're fighting in this graveyard full of flowers and all these swords of the past hunters, I think. And it's such a I think it's such a cinematic fight, because Bloodborne also, since you have to dodge around so much, you just as you fight, you just naturally get to see the scope of the graveyard properly as you fight Gurman. And then, with all the blood spraying around, you also, and all the flowers in the graveyard being white, it's also, how do I put it? Very aesthetically pleasing, as the fight progresses, the graveyard becomes bloodier and bloodier. And, it really I think it's sort of like symbolic of sort of how your entire journey throughout the game has been so far. And yeah, I just think that Gurman was a fantastic way to wrap up the game, in sort of a not super hidden, but a very cool end boss fight.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah.
All right. Gino, what do you got for me?
Pokemon.
Pokemon.
So what I mean for Pokemon, the biggest thing that I want to talk about with them is the different bosses for each is pretty much the post-game bosses that have. Pokemon has a lot of post-game content with a lot of its earlier games, starting with the original super boss of Mewtwo, trying to catch it, and eventually going through with Fire and Leaf Green, having the rematches, Red and Gold and Silver being a huge thing. But one game in particular I want to focus on is Pokemon Black 2 version, because the biggest thing in Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 is that there are 8 or so bosses with at least level 70 Pokemon you can fight. There is Colress, which has all steel types. You have N, who has a different team for each season. They're all in the 70s, and they're all focused on different weather increment too. Because you have one, if it's summer, it's sunny day. If it's winter, it's hail. Man, that hail team is going to be fun to fight.
Yeah.
And the best thing about that is that each of these summons is that each boss can pertain to the story as well. Because whenever you fight a super boss in Pokemon, it eventually leads into a different fight that challenges the opponent. There are 2 super bosses in particular that I want to focus on. One being Red, which, especially in Heart Gold Soul Silver, where Heart Gold Soul Silver is a game where you have the main game, you have the entire Johto post game, but even after that, then you have all the gym leader rematches, all the legendaries you can capture, plus the Elite Four rematches, and then above all of those guys is Red, who has level 80 Pokemon and is one of the hardest challenges in any.
Yeah, the Gen
Pokemon
2
game.
the Gen 2 remakes, Gen 2 and Gen 2 remakes both have like some of the most content-rich Pokemon games.
Black 2 has one of the best post games as well, because not only do you have all the super bosses, there are 15 legendaries you can catch. There are there are Cynthia you can fight again, Alder you can fight again. There's the Pokemon World Tournament, which has every gym leader and champion from previous games. So as the games continue, each of the bosses just get better and better, and that's what I liked about the Pokemon games, because there is always a better. It always shows that when you try to become the strongest, there are always going to be people coming back and fighting you, even when you do become the strongest trainer.
It's very much in keeping with the Pokemon franchise, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't done much of the Pokemon, and recently I haven't really done much of the Pokemon post-game content. Playing Heart Gold and Soul Silver for a podcast episode we did way back in the day.
Oh yeah, shoot! I remember. I replayed. I played Blue and Platinum for that episode. That was early 2016.
I remember. Yeah, that was a lot of Pokemon.
Yeah.
And the fight against Red in particular is just that whole section is so awesome and so rewarding. Getting to visit Kanto again, and then it culminates in this incredible, challenging fight that I loved. I love that fight. I had a really hard time with it, but I really enjoyed it. Mike, your turn. What do you got for me?
Well, I'll briefly talk about super bosses in the DiGioia video games, because I've played most of the games in that series and indulged in end boss hunting for about half of those. But the thing to know about DiGioia is that it is a strategy RPG of excesses. You can level up to 9,999, then reincarnate back to level 1 with slightly higher stats, and then level up to 9,999 again. And it has exploitative paths like that. You can jump into items to level them up. You can jump into individual character stats and moves to level those up. It is basically just a complete mishmash of leveling things up to find new ways to level things up. And Nipponichi games in general, or I should say Nipponichi strategy RPGs in general, have a recurring final boss named Bale, who I believe was first in La Pucelle Tactics for the PS2, but has shown up in various forms throughout the different games in those in that related series, including most of the DiGioia games. And my favorite version of Bale is probably the DiGioia 2 version, because when you first fight him, I could be getting these numbers off by a little bit. I believe he's level 4,000. And in perspective, I think you beat the game against final bosses that are around level 75 or 80. Mm-hmm. So you fight this level 4,000 guy, and he has one of the two of the strongest items in the game equipped to him. So you really should bring along a thief to steal those from him if you have a chance. And then after you defeat it once, every time you try to fight him again, instead of fighting a level 4,000 Bale, you're fighting a level 8,000 Prinny Bale. And again, Prinnies are the peg-legged penguin characters that are sinners in the real world reincarnate into Prinnies as punishment. So you're fighting like the Prinny reincarnation of Bale, and he's surrounded by 4 copies of the level 4,000 Bale that you fought before. But with slightly different equipment, I think. So and it gets sillier and sillier. Like in DiGioia 3, Bale's been reincarnated into a mushroom to regain his powers. In DiGioia 4, Bale has stolen something from everyone, and instead of fighting Bale, you fight a super robot Prinny called Pringer X. And it basically the various Bales and Prinnies you fight in DiGioia are always overpowered, always have completely absurd skills and moves. There's one ability that I think the later Pringer X characters have that they'll automatically deal immense damage to any character that leaves your home base. So all of your units need very high health and defense just to be allowed to be used in that fight. And they're also immune to friendly fire, so he'll keep cloning himself and throwing area attacks everywhere, but he's immune to his own attacks.
Sounds balanced.
Yeah, no, the thing is, the DiGioia games aren't balanced, but they're also unbalanced in both directions. So players can completely wreck the level curve with all kinds of miniature exploits and tricks, and then the game will also throw challenges to meet those levels of exploitative nonsense. And there's some fun to that excess, but also like people will see, what do you mean I have to grind to level 1000, then reincarnate, and then repeat that 20 times just to be able to just to be able to fight the boss, and then to fight the boss I have to convince a senate full of demons by bribing them with items. It's like there's so much BS attached to the Disgaea games that they can be intimidating or even frustrating, and I get that, but I also sort of love it for being a celebration of RPG excess, and its super bosses I think reflect that feeling of excess that they bring on. And again, the only versions of Bale that I've beaten are in Disgaea 1 and 2. I've only seen videos of the other ones, and I think I got to him in La Pucelle Tactics, but never beat him because I basically just beat the story in La Pucelle and then said forget it. But yeah, I mean, Disgaea is a very weird specific thing, and I think I haven't played Disgaea 5, but of the ones I have played, most of them are great, and sometimes I miss them, but then I remember how much leveling there is, and then I don't miss them anymore.
So what I'm getting is that Disgaea is a very, very, very deep rabbit hole.
Yeah, same.
For real. Well, so we come to the close. I did want to ask before we move on to the negative, since it feels like a travesty for an RPG fan podcast to not talk about Shin Megami Tensei or Persona.
Oh, I'm going to bring up Shin Megami Tensei very soon.
Okay, but does anyone have anything positive to say about the SMT super bosses before we move on?
I want to talk quickly about the super boss in Tokyo Mirage Sessions, since it's half SMT.
All right, knock it out.
M. Deus, the super boss, which you have to beat the game once in order to unlock, and if you fight it on lunatic difficulty, you have to grind your stats up a lot. There is a damage cap. It has the damage cap for any attack you take, and it can only get into session attacks by using one ability, Worm Slayer, because it has no weaknesses and can only be damaged through either Worm Slayer or session attacks. And those session attacks only goes up to 490 damage, unlike the damage cap at 999. It has a lot of one-hit KO moves, and it's considered by the people who fought it to be as hard as Demi Fiend in terms of if you fight it on lunatic difficulty.
Oh dear. Maybe if when Tokyo Mirage Sessions gets ported to the Switch, please, I'll give it another try. So we've talked a lot about super bosses we like, super bosses that add interesting story connections. They develop the game's lore in an interesting way, or they're challenging and rewarding to fight. There are always the bad apples, though. So we're gonna go around. We're gonna round robin this one more time. Dom, can you name a bad super boss?
Yes. So, well, it's not so much a super boss as it's just an optional boss. But
okay,
in Nier Automata, there's a quote unquote boss unit, which is a tank, and like up to that point has been pretty sort of inventive, at least with its bosses. With the whole, I believe you might have already fought the singing lady and stuff, and like it's been pretty cool with its boss fights and how they handle. But when you first encountered the Goliath tank and then like you aggro it by hitting it, the first thing that went through my mind was, oh, is it gonna like transform? Is it gonna like become like a humanoid robot that I have to like fight all Transformers and stuff? And it's just a tank, and like it just like kind of rolls towards you very slowly, and sometimes it like fakes you out because by shooting out confetti instead of an actual projectile.
Is that the one that shows up randomly in the world and has like a little brother that's like all mad at you? Or am I thinking of a different enemy?
I think that's a different one. This one appears in the amusement park, and I think it's a set spot and stuff. But yeah, and you fight it, and it's not much of a fight really. You sort of just like walk around, and you just like sort of whack at its sides because it can't turn fast enough. And yeah, the most interesting part about it is that it shoots confetti at you sometimes. So you're like, oh, wow, I didn't need to dodge there. But like beyond that, I just thought it fell like so short of like everything the game had showed the player up to that point that it was just like it was an easy fight. It wasn't a particularly big hurdle to like jump over or anything, but it was just a disappointment overall.
Yeah, if it sets about below a game with such a high bar of quality, that's definitely something to take note of for sure. Gino, you got some? Do you want? Can you let the anger flow through you here?
And I'm kind of an optimist when it comes to a lot of video games, but I can think of probably the worst super boss I fought in recent memory. Yeah, the Phantom from Kingdom Hearts 1. Because
That guy's really annoying.
I know. Long story short, you are gliding, which means you can't guard. You can only attack him. You can only attack him at multiple times with certain abilities at multiple times via a crystal that he has on him. A crystal which can disappear after you hit it enough times. The it can cast doom on you it can cast doom on you from afar, which is timed on the clock, which luckily you can use stop in order to which luckily you stop on the clock in order to stop the counter from going down, but that means you have to go back, stop, hit the crystal a couple times, back and forth, and the guy has homing magic attacks. He flies around like it's nothing, and it's just so irritating.
Yeah,
And of
that
course,
fuck.
yeah,
Go
and
ahead.
of course, if Doom actually hits, your character doesn't die. He's taking from the battle completely for the rest of the match.
Yeah. So when it happens to one of your party members, they're just gone.
Yep, if it happens to you, bye bye.
That whole fight in general just felt like they needed a reason for the stop spell to even exist. He moves around. He moves around really quickly. That is a really challenging fight. I agree. It's no fun. No fun whatsoever.
No fun allowed.
No fun allowed in Phantom Zone. Mike.
Now, you probably predicted it already. Who I'm going to talk about? I think we even referenced him briefly earlier, but it's the Demi Fiend in Digital Devil Saga.
Yeah, this
Uh,
guy's infamous.
He's infamously the toughest SMT super boss, and I think that reputation's deserved. But before we talk about him specifically, just SMT super bosses in general are often either minor characters from the game or cameos from older games. Like I think in the Raido Kuzunoha games, you can play a bunch of other oh shoot, what are they called? A bunch of other like soul hackers and characters from that sub series are available as bosses in that one. Or
Right.
and in both Digital Devil Saga games, there's a lot of Shin Megami Tensei demons available as super bosses. Huang Long or Koryu is a really cool super boss in Digital Devil Saga 1. But in general, one thing that they have in common is that they almost always fit a pattern. Like they'll use the same attacks or the same option of attacks in the same order, and you can if by observing or by checking a guide or something, you'll see what the pattern is, and you can strategize around that pattern. Like know when to cast your defensive spells, when to do this, when to do that, in order to beat them. And the thing about the Demi Fiend is that his pattern is so brutal that it doesn't help, and there is there is a lot of you need to definitely level up to 99 and have a certain strategy and certain moves in place in order to even scratch him. He's accompanied by two demons at all times. Whenever one dies, he'll summon another one immediately, and there's a cycle of 6 that he goes through. And when he summons Pixie, Pixie will heal him to maximum. And then after the Pixie heals him to maximum once, the Pixie will cast him a Megalodion or one of the the Mega class of Almighty spells over and over until Pixie dies. And if it makes through the whole cycle, if the Demi Fiend makes it through the whole cycle once, and any of your characters have elemental nulling skills or physical nulling skills equipped, other than null sleep, because you're allowed to avoid sleep, I guess, then he'll cast a sort of a one-hit kill move over and over. So you can't equip defensive null skills. You have to constantly deal with his wave of demons that he's summoning over and over, and all of his moves affect all characters, and most of them have status effects or other BS associated with them. It is a brutal pattern, and also if you get through, if you defeat his row of demon buddies 6 times, then Pixie will heal him back to full with Meteor-Han.
Well, that's
So
just stupid.
yeah, it's terrible. You can only play him.
Classic.
You can only play him in a New Game Plus, and you definitely need to be level 99 just to survive his regular stuff. And one of your characters basically needs to be on support and or healing at all times. It should probably be Cielo, just so you get as much speed as possible. But like Digital Devil Saga is a cool game with a lot of cool monsters and demons in it, and a lot of the other optional boss fights like Beelzebub and Huanglong, and oh shoot, there's at least one more I'm forgetting. Is Metatron in that game, or yeah?
I think Metatron is in that
yeah,
one.
Yeah, like Metatron and Huanglong are the two really hard bosses other than the Demi-Fiend, and those are both cool. But the Demi-Fiend is just, oh god, so brutal. It feels unfair a lot of the time, and it even limits you from using some of your best skills, because if you equip them, you will get one shot. And I think his reputation as the hardest SMT boss ever is earned. I fought him once. It went so poorly that I don't think I lasted 5 turns. Because also remember in Digital Devil Saga, like in Nocturne, if they get a knockdown against your team or if they score a critical hit, then the enemy gets bonus turns. And trust me, they will exploit that.
That mechanic just that mechanic. A lot of those mechanics get brought onto the Persona series too, where the Velvet Room siblings make you have certain conditions before you, especially Elizabeth in Persona 3, before you fight them. And
it's the same thing in Persona 3. If you have a nullifying condition on the main character, or if you break any of the rules she sets, she'll summon Pixie, who will deal 9,999 damage to you.
All three of them was just summoned. Yeah,
for some reason they have Pixie as like the ultimate persona for the beings of power in that game. It's, I don't know, they those SMT designers really like that Kaneko Pixie design, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to know they're in on their own memes.
Yeah, same thing if you have a Niftim Orb in future Persona games. They'll just blast you. They'll just heal and blast you into one until you all die.
It's one thing to die over and over to an SMT boss, but it's another thing to die over and over against their meme. Thanks. So yeah, maybe don't deal with the Demi-Fiend. It's not worth it.
Real quick, I wanted to touch on this real quickly before we close out, but for my pick for negatives, the Dark Aeons they added in Final Fantasy X International are stupid. Like, in terms of, for my money, in terms of everything bad about video game super bosses, they're challenging. They're just hard for no reason. They have absurd stats. They don't add anything interesting to the story. In fact, they make navigating the game's world in the late game completely obnoxious. Like, you're going to have to contend with Dark Valifor if you want to get Valifor's second overdrive now. I randomly bumped into Dark Yojimbo while I was going to get normal Yojimbo. Like, it's just, Ten's world wasn't designed to incorporate these characters. They're just there. Like, they're just kind of slapped in there. And the boss that you get for beating all of them, Penance. I mean,
at least Penance doesn't like stand in the way of a town that you want to get into.
Yeah, at the very least, Penance feels like, okay, we added something here that is new. But I mean, his name is earned because fighting him feels like a punishment. Like, it's just that fight is stupid. It's, the whole thing is just you need very specific setup. You need to be at max skills. You essentially, like, I don't like anything that requires you to basically break the game in order to overcome them. And the Dark Aeons and Penance both all feel like they are pushing the boundaries of what is, like, acceptable in, like, how much BS should you be willing to put up with to see the game's hardest content? Final Fantasy X may push you to that absolute limit.
Don't forget, like, Pokemon Platinum, where you have to beat the Elite Four 20 times to unlock that game's
Yeah, right. He's like,
Hey, I did that anyway, just leveling up my Tratini.
I know you told me I did. I actually grinded. I actually beat all those. I actually beat the league for 20 times just so I can get that boss. So, um, I'm surprised you didn't mention FF12's little infamous.
Oh yeah,
oh
Yasmat.
yeah, Yasmat is dumb too, and that raises another thing about bad super boss design. Where okay, A, he's just strong for no reason. B, like bosses that are pretty much just recolors of existing enemies, and you get the best weapon in the game for beating him, but by that point, there's nothing worth using it on.
Well, in Zodiac Age there is because you have the arena mode right after that.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah. So fair enough. In Zodiac Age, you can like go and take on the other judges or whatnot. But even then, it's still like, what's even the point of this? You know, it's there for the sake of it being there. It feels like, and to be fair, 12 has some other better like Zodiac and Ultima are both pretty cool optional content. The Espers in 12 are generally pretty good with that sort of thing.
And we'll probably, I mean, we've talked about 10 and 12, but in between those, you have that Final Fantasy 11 boss that takes 18 hours for a full team to defeat.
Oh yeah,
It's called absolute. It's called absolute virtue or absolute justice or something, and it just has the most absurd amount of health that I don't know. Just makes me less interested in FF11 than ever.
Yeah, it's Final Fantasy in recent years, I think, has gotten into this weird mindset about how more HP equals harder boss fight, and I mean, I guess there is some truth in that it's going to make players not want to fight him, but it's
it makes me pine for the days of Ruby Weapon and Ozma that were just kind of unfair.
So I can't wait for the FF7 remake to come out in 2030, and they'll have patched in Genesis and with photorealistic gacked face, and he's just completely unbeatable.
No, he's going to be called Genesis Weapon, and it'll be just a giant mecha with a gacked face that, you know, if you have a materia with over 100 AP attached to it, then he'll instantly kill that character or something.
Isn't his final form called Genesis Omega or something like that? Omega
you
Genesis?
know, maybe. It's been so long since I played Crisis Core.
Another game I'd like to see re-released Square. That one also has kind of a stupid super boss, Minerva.
Oh, yeah. I wonder if that's related to the Minerva armor that you can find in FF6.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's supposed to be connected to the goddess from the Loveless poem or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't been up on my FF7 lore since I was 14. So
Are you talking about Minerva? Are you talking about Minerva, the super boss in Crisis Core?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
How dare you, Peter? You and I watched the Advent Children movie together less than a year ago.
I have watched Advent Children more times than I would care to admit on a live show. Well, that about does it for episode 141 of Retro Encounter. If you like what you heard, feel free to reach out to us, retro@rpgfan.com. We always love to hear from you guys. Hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, the boards we don't use, Discord, wherever you can reach us. Just to take care of some basic housekeeping. We got our episodes for July that are going to be coming out are going to be based on Lunar, popular PlayStation RPG, PlayStation, Saturn, and PSP. Am I correct?
They started out as Sega CD RPGs, and then they had remakes on the Saturn and PS1, and then another remake on the PSP. And we will discuss the differences between those. We've already recorded one episode.
All right, so please look forward to that. And be sure to check out our ongoing coverage of E3 2018. They'll still be posting stuff for the coming weeks, and there's a lot of good stuff people saw at the show. So we're excited to share that with you. If you want to reach out to one of us individually, you can find me at IHaveFury on Twitter or PeterT@RPGFan.com. Gino, where can we reach you?
You can get me at Disney Drag Gino on Twitter or randomly in a GameStop looking at JRPGs.
That's called profiling, and I will have none of it. Dom, how about you, man?
You can find me as DHCandy on the forums or on Discord, or you can email me at domk@rpgfan.com.
Donkey Kang.
I didn't come up
Donkey
with
Kong.
Okay.
And what about you? What about you, Mike? Where can we reach you?
Oh, I've said this so many times. I am at The Real Monsoon on Twitter most of the time. I am at Monsoon Mike on Discord. And if you email retro@rpgfan.com, I am probably the person responding.
Well, all right. Probably. You never know. It could be my ghost after another rewatch of Advent Children, and I'll just deluge you with random obscure trivia that has stayed in my brain all these years. But anyways, that'll do it for this episode of Retro Encounter. Thanks for joining us. For myself, for Gino, for Dom, and for Mike, good night, good luck. Demi-Fiend is a terribly designed super boss.